Welcome to the Gospel Hour with David. Today we're going to be going over our Bible study of Matthew chapter 17 and some of chapters 18. And in it, today, I kind of want to talk about PTSD, right? Post-traumatic stress disorder. Things that have maybe happened bad in our lives, in our prior lives, or whatever has happened in the past, could have been yesterday, whatever it may be, and yet those memories of what happened kind of plague our life. That's the thing I kind of want to talk about is if we grew up as children and we grew up in a home that was an abusive home, we're going to do what comes naturally to us. We're going to live our lives in exactly the same way it was taught to us. And we, as human beings, we all have imperfections, we all have failures, and we all have what the Bible calls is sin. That those things are very real and they're very much in our lives, no matter who we are. Malice, the want to see the harm and destruction of our enemies, it is always a real thing. And this is the battle. We, as human beings, are greedy. We, as human beings, are selfish. Now, where does all that come from? That comes from our upbringing. That's what we've learned in life. And that's the natural process of how a parent teaches a child, right? You must be selfish. You must love only yourself. You have to look out for only yourself. Well, anyway, we take the things that we've learned and then we apply it to our life. Now, maybe we've learned these things and now we have to unlearn them. And we have to try something new and we have to try something different. One of the things in the Bible is it talks about the washing of hands. And one time they even reprimand Jesus, like, how dare you and your disciples eat food without washing your hands, right? And Jesus says, hey, nothing you eat or goes into your mouth or your body, it's eaten, goes into the belly, and then it's shot right out into the waste pile. But the evil and the wickedness doesn't come from washing your hands, right, or not washing your hands. It comes and it's generated from within our heart. It's stored up from within our bodies and our minds from the things we've learned and experienced in life. Why do I talk a lot about abuse? Because that's the things I've experienced in my life. Now I can tell you about how I overcame it and how I'm overcoming it every time. Because when you're abused, and there's many different forms, right? We can pick and choose whatever form we've been abused by. It has an effect on our life. It changes the way we think. It changes the way we perceive people. It changes who we are. There's an effect. There's a cause, and then there's effect to the cause, right? How do we overcome the effects? Well, first of all, that's the washing of the hands. It's an admission or a confession. Now, I'm not confessing that I'm a sinner. I'm confessing that what I've been trying to do hasn't been working, and what I'm trying to do has been the works of my own hands, right? I was molested, as an example, could have been molested as a child. I grew up as an adult, and I seek revenge by condemning all men as worthless bastards. Many people do this, right? And they grow up and they seek revenge, and I'm going to make it my life's goal to see to it every child molester and pedophile on earth is caught, bound, and thrown into prison, right? These are the effects, and then to say, hey, not only have I been affected, this is the washing of the hands, admitting my hands are dirty. We should be. That's the thing, is admitting I was affected, and admitting that the effect that it had on me changed my life, and even that I may have used some of the things I learned. If I was abused, I learned how to be abusive. How do I break the cycle? Well, I gotta wash my hands. I gotta admit that I'm seeking revenge, and that is not of God, and in that it adds to my frustration. Problems with PTSD. This is how we start, right? This is how we start our day. Every day, and we as people who are in a relationship, and yeah, I'm in a relationship, and it's a struggle. And why is it a struggle? Because I've been affected by abuse, and perhaps my spouse or loved one or my partner has been affected also. And now we got to take these two affected or broken people and bring them together and meld them into one person, and yet those effects kind of prevent the melding. So how does our day start? We start a day full of hope. And usually we hope today is going to be better than tomorrow. Or excuse me, yesterday. I hope today is going to be better than yesterday. So we start our day full of hope. Today, example, I hope to get a job, right? Maybe I'm out of work, whatever it is. Today, I hope to get a job. Now, today, by the end of the day, I don't get that job. Don't get the job. I'm disappointed because I made a plan, and that plan didn't come to fulfillment. Now, I am disappointed. I go from disappointed to discouraged. And then when I get from past discouragement, I get to, I'm flat out depressed. I'm sad, feeling worthless, feeling unvalued, unrespected, or uncared for. And then now it's time to go to bed, wake up the next morning for hope. Today is going to be a better day than yesterday. Again, I'm going to try and get a job or whatever it may be that I want to change in my life. Disappointed. Now, if you're a single person, you could just run through this cycle endlessly. Endlessly. Or if you're trying to meld into a relationship, once the failure starts and the disappointment comes, now the arguments begin. Why did it fail? What happened? Right? And then all of a sudden we're stuck and we're focused on the negatives. The things that didn't happen, the things that couldn't be done, or whatever it is, and we begin to fall under the devil's snare or the devil's trap. And the devil is there to convince you that you cannot, you can't do it, you can't. I can't, right? And then there tries to convince you, I won't. I can't, and I won't. I won't get the job because I can't. I don't measure up because I'm not good enough. It's completely on focusing on negative energy, negative thoughts, and negative things. Sometimes PTSD, what are we remembering about our past? Well, we're not remembering the good days. We're remembering the abusive days, the negative days, the negative thoughts, and the negative things that happened to us. That's one of the effects of abuse, is we're drawn towards the negative. Now, you go from I can't to I won't to I don't, right? I don't matter. I don't measure up. I'm not good enough. There's something wrong with me. Now we're discouraged, and we could be with a spouse or somebody involved. You can be fighting and agitating each other back and forth about trying how to figure out, why don't you matter? Why don't you do this? Why can't you do these things? And depression, right? I'm now ashamed of myself because I believe I can't, I don't, and I won't, right? I believe these things. I won't get the new job. Today won't be better than yesterday. And there I'm feeling guilty. I'm feeling ashamed. And, my self-worth, my self-esteem, and my own self-value is then diminished. Now, what do I do with that? Well, as a natural human being, I try to conquer that I don't matter and all those things by continually seeking out my worth from the job or the cars or the homes or whatever it may be. It could be from social status, my friends, and these things. But then all of a sudden we're always left feeling empty. It's not good enough. It doesn't measure up. I can't overcome the depression, the discouragement, and the disappointments. And completely, completely caught in that cycle. And that can go on for years. And all of it, when we're stuck in a cycle of PTSD, we have somehow, one of the effects of this abuse or being exposed to some sort of trauma is the absence of God. Where, oh where you? Why have you forsaken me? And isn't that exactly what Jesus says when he's on the cross, right? Where is my God? Why have you forsaken me? And we all may come to that point in our life. Is God removed from us? No, wasn't Jesus and God one? And so why did God forsake Jesus or leave him hanging on the cross? In order to have a relationship with you. That's why. So Jesus says, I will never leave you, and I will never forsake you. Right? So why was Jesus left on the cross? So that he could fulfill God's promises and words. Now, I want to come here to Jesus, chapter 17. Jesus heals a boy with a demon, right? And now listen, chapter 17, verse 14, as we go through this. And when they came to the crowd, a man came up to him and kneeling before him said, Lord, have mercy on my son, for he is an epileptic and he suffers terribly. For he often falls into the fire and often into the water. And I brought him to your disciples, and they could not heal him. And they could not heal him. Sometimes with spouses and people, and whoever we are in whatever relationships you may be engaged in, we want that person to be Jesus. I want you to provide for me. I want you to supply for me. I want you to protect me. When I sin, when I make a mistake, I want you to cover your eyes and close them. When I need the door opened, I want you to open the door. When I want respect, I want you to respect me.
It's called chivalry.
Chivalry. And a good husband and a good wife would do these things for each other. But God, Jesus, has closed his eyes to your sin. He wants to be your provider. And in him, all things are subject to him, and he can provide whatever it is you desire or need to overcome, or to get by, or to endure, or to live in joy and live in happiness. But I can fail you. And when you put your hope in me, you're disappointed. Why? Because I'm a man. I'm not God. I am not Jesus. Who can fill the hole? Jesus. Jesus has opened the door for you, and opened a door that no man can shut. So we go to a man to find hope, and that man fails you. Now I'm discouraged, and I can't understand why this person has failed me. And it's because my hope is in something that is perishing, and is perishable, and is made and sown in sin. It can't do it. You're asking somebody to do something that God has not endowed them with the power to do. Yet Jesus Christ has that power. And if our hope is in Him, we'll find the joy. And all of a sudden, He can open the door that allows us to have freedom from the cycle of hope to disappointment to discouragement, leading to depression.
If that were true, David, then marriage wouldn't exist.
Marry Christ. And that's the thing. If we were all married, if I, the man, was married to Jesus Christ, then there'd be no reason for wifey, whoever she may be, would love me as though I was Jesus. One member in that body. Jesus being the head of the body. God, our Father, is His face. And we are a member in that body. So it couldn't work. Now, what does Jesus give us? Because He's going to start us with a new day, and that day is going to start with hope, and then it's going to go to faith, loyalty, love. Right? What about being loyal to God?
You're reading my words.
Well, God can speak through anyone. Are we willing to listen? That's the thing. Sometimes we're so busy and focused on what we don't have and what we can't do. Let's refocus on what we do have and what we can do. Because if we're focused on what we got, we can do anything. We can do anything. And what do we got? Well, if we got Jesus Christ, we have no limits. Now, listen. Let's go back to the little story. Often he falls, and the man's talking about his son, falls into the fire, falls into the water. And I brought him to your disciples, and they could not heal him. Jesus answered, O faithless and twisted generation, how long am I to be with you? How long am I to bear with you? Bring him to me. Right? And so when the father is begging for recognition for a son, begging for men and people, hey, heal my son. Make it so I can love my son. Because he's in a bad spot. Right? And in those days, any and every sickness that was known to man was caused by a demon. And we know today there are millions of people who suffer from epilepsy and seizures and all those things. And that we also know that today God has provided a cure for that through CBD oils or marijuana. Marijuana. It's weird, but it actually can cure people. Now, what was twisted about this? O ye of little faith, don't you believe that God loves you just the way you are? Loves you perfectly the way you are. Even in your imperfections and in your mistakes and in your inability to do whatever it is you can't do, God still loves you perfectly. Just the way you are. And you don't have to prove it. Some of us, when we're abused as children, called stupid. You're stupid. You're dumb. You're an idiot. Oh, you dumb idiot. You know, how many dads say that to their children? In my home, it was common. It's common. Right? So then you spend the rest of your life trying to prove to everybody in the world you're not stupid.
Was it common?
It sure was. Those things are common. This doesn't mean they're true. That doesn't mean that fathers can't change over time and through their lives. or any of us. But sure.
You can teach an old mule new tricks.
Well, you can. You can.
You can?
Yep. Jesus rebuked the demon, and it came out of him. And the boy was healed instantly. Then the disciples came to Jesus privately and said to him, "Why could we not cast out the demons?" And he said to them, "Because of your little faith. For truly I say to you, if you have faith like the grain of a mustard seed, you will pray to God." And God, and is that what the Bible says? No. Many people say prayer is the most powerful thing on earth, and yet Jesus is saying, no, prayer is not the most powerful thing on earth. Faith is. Because if you had faith, you would walk up to the mountain. Faith gives you authority. And you would tell the mountain to move. I wouldn't ask God to tell the mountain to move. I wouldn't waste God's time. I would believe that God was with me and willing to use me as a vessel to move mountains. Nothing would be impossible for you. No, I'm okay. All right? Nothing would be impossible for you. Now, as they were gathering in Galilee, Jesus said to them, "The Son of Man is about to be delivered into the hands of men, and they will kill him. And he will be raised on the third day." And they were greatly distressed. Remember, in their day, they completely believed that the Messiah, that God's anointed one, was going to come with a fiery ball from heaven right in his hand, and he was going to destroy Rome. And he was going to destroy all the enemies of Israel. And he was going to conquer all the Gentiles in all the world through the wrath of God. Yet, he came, and that was the complete opposite of what Jesus did. He didn't come with fire and blowing brimstone and sulfur from his butt, devouring all of his enemies. He didn't do that. And they were distressed over that. How can God hand us a Savior, us, somebody as great and mighty and a miracle worker as you are, so loving and caring? You're like the only doctor the world has ever seen who could actually cure people from their diseases and sickness. Why would you be handed over and crucified? That's not of God. That's not what it's supposed to be about. Yet God has made it that way so that he may display his power through the broken, the weak, the rejected. Display his power through them. Same with in the days of Israel, walking through the wilderness 40 years, go to the land of Canaan, tells all the men, sends a representative from each tribe into the land of Canaan, go spy it out. And they go spy it out, and they come back, and only two men, Joshua and Caleb, have a good report. Hey, yeah, we could take them down. We could take over that city. No problem. The Lord is with us. And then all the others came back and say, whoa, here, this tiny little grasshoppers in their eyes. These people are giants. They're huge. They will devour us. What'd you do, Moses? Bring us out here to devour our children. Now God uses the very children, the very people that the parents all said were going to be devoured and destroyed by all these giants who lived in these well-fortified cities. And he uses those. He uses those people. It's a display of God's love. That he would use the broken, the lame. He could use those suffering from PTSD to do mighty things. And not just do mighty things, but to build his kingdom. Now, I want to go here to another little read. It says, chapter 18, verse 10, "See to it that You do not despise one of these little ones. For I tell you that in heaven their angels always see the face of my Father, who is in heaven. What do you think? If a man has 100 sheep and one of them gone astray, does he not leave the 99 on the mountains and go in search of the one that went astray? And if he finds it, truly I say to you, he rejoices over it more than the 99 that never left or went astray. So, it is not the will of God or my Father that who is in heaven, that one of these little ones should perish. Should perish. And that includes you. That includes you. That none would perish. Not the sick, not the lame. So what we focus on? We need to focus on what we can do. Don't focus too far into the future, because you have no control of the future. But only that which you can do, what God has enabled you to do. And He has enabled you to endure, to overcome, and to be able to change your life so that you're no longer stuck in disappointment, discouragement, and depression, but can be filled with faith, love, loyalty, and hope. And that's the thing I want you to see, that God, loyal to the people, being completely loyal to His word and to His people. Even if they didn't believe in Him, He was still loyal to them. Verse 15, chapter 18, book of Matthew says, if your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault, between you and him alone. If he listens to you, you have gained your brother. But if he does not listen, take one or two others with you, that every charge may be established by the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. It's very hard when somebody comes to you and says, hey, I want to tell you hurt my feelings. I want to tell you about how you violated me, how you broke my trust. I want to tell you about how you frustrated me and upsetted me. That's very hard to do to someone. And when it's coming, when you're the one, it's even harder. It's harder to admit. So now Jesus says, this is what I'd like you to do. Take a couple witnesses with you. It's not just your word against their word, but so that it's established upon the evidence. Hey man, your bad behavior is breaking me down. Your malicious talk, one of the effects from a childhood abuse is having a malicious heart. That is a heart and a desire to see the enemies be destroyed. And instead of loving your enemies, instead of blessing those who persecute you, no, I'm going to be just like those who persecuted me, and I'm going to persecute them back, right? Those are the opposites of the teachings of God. And what if somebody comes to you and says, hey, you're a jerk? That's tough, right? Now what if they won't listen? So what are we talking about here? Forgiveness. Forgiveness. One of the problems with PTSD is whatever traumatic event happened in our life that happened in the past, I can't forgive it. In fact, not only can I not forgive it, anytime something new happens in my life that reminds me of that place where I can't forgive, I'm upset and I'm angry and I want to attack that thing. And that's unforgiveness. Unforgiveness gives us the want or the desire to seek out revenge. Revenge is not of God. Revenge is unforgiveness. And so if I can't forgive my past or my past abusers or these things, it carries along with you. And it may not be a problem until something triggers you to remember that past event.
So may I ask, why are you still carrying on about it?
because it's got to
If
be
you haven't let it go.
forgiven. That's the thing. Is if we're not living in the moment, and we're always going back to comparing our lives of today from what happened to our past, it's unforgiven. And we've got to move forward. And the only way to move forward, as he says, if it doesn't work between two or more witnesses, one of the hardest things as a victim of abuse is to go to your abuser and say to your abuser, you violated me, you hurt me, you did all these things to me, and it had an effect on my life, and it changed my life, and it crippled me in some of the areas of my life. It's tough to go to say to that person, to say, this is what you did to me, and now I want to forgive you for those things. That's tough. That's tough. They don't listen to that. They don't listen to that. Go and tell it to the church. And the word church is to the assembly, a great assembly of many people. So sometimes for like, if our concerns may be our loved one or spouse has drugs or alcohol problems, we create an intervention. I mean, if you really loved this person, and sometimes the person that you gotta love the most is yourself, the person in the midst of it who is trying to rectify whatever abuse or problems that come along. All right? And if he refuses to even listen to the church, let him be to you as a Gentile and as a tax collector. So Jesus is talking to Jewish people. Gentiles are evil, wicked. The Roman Empire is a wicked, evil people. And the most wicked and evil people are Jewish people who are working for the Roman government by taking taxes. Taking taxes. And in the way the Romans took taxes was, you give us money and we will let you live through today. That's how they did it. It was purely to rob, rape, and pillage the world. And they were unjustly being robbed, raped, and pillaged. Tax collector, how dare you be a Jew, call yourself my brother, and work for the enemy. So all right. Truly, I say to you, whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven. And whatever you loosen on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Again, I say to you, if two of you agree on earth about anything they ask. So why am I being disappointed? Why am I being discouraged? Where does the depression come from? All right, we're not in agreement. I could say all day long, and I could call you my wife all day long, but until you say, I agree with you, I am not only your wife, you are my husband. There, God is right there in the midst of them, and this is what he says. If you agree on anything they ask, it will be done for them by my Father in heaven. In heaven. Where is the kingdom of heaven? Where is God's abode? Where is God's dwelling place? In you. In you. In me. I am the temple of the Lord, and heaven is within. It's within. He says, for where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there I am among them. Who believes that? Do you believe right now, Stephanie, that Jesus Christ is sitting in this room with you? Silence. See? Who believes that? But Jesus says, this is faith. When you believe it. This is what Jesus says. 100 times over. Believe me. Believe me. Believe me. I'm the only one who can love you unconditionally. Believe me. See, the problem with love in this world in general, is we have a condition for everything. It's a condition for everything. And everything. Especially love. Wow, how can I love you when you don't have a job? How can I love you when you're doing this or this and this? And that's a condition. That's a condition. Everything in this world comes with a condition.
Yeah.
Except for God.
You have a mouth like a worse than a foul-mouthed sailor.
I'm not a foul-mouthed sailor. I'm a foul-mouthed construction worker. We taught sailors how to speak. And that's the thing. It's one of the effects of childhood abuse when you've been lived in a life and grew up in a home where the daily language was wrapped around in the forms of vile language, cursing, F-bombs, B-bombs, C-bombs.
Yeah. It screws up my faith.
Well, and that's the thing we have to unlearn. We have to
Because
unlearn what we learned.
I wasn't raised like that.
Right.
There was an occasional,
Right.
my Viking mama, the only time, you gotta really piss her off to hear her curse, which is very rare.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, imagine my shock.
Right. That's the thing. We all do not live in the same reality. You live in your world and you grew up in your world, and even though our realities intermingle and intertwine and they cross one another, the reality is the way I was born, raised, and brought up was different than you. And then you come into my world and you're
Christian?
like, whoa!
How is that
I come
Christian?
into your world. And
How
I'm
is
like,
that
whoa.
Christian behavior?
Well, that's the thing, is why do you, and that's you, who put the Christian on the pedestal. There's a man who has a boy, and he's an epileptic.
Nobody goes to church and talks like that.
No,
Unless they have Asperger's disease or,
No, they
or
do.
their Tourette's.
They do.
Oh, they do?
Yeah. Yeah. See, everybody wears, this is the thing with problem in America. Everybody has an alter ego. Or
Oh, so
persona.
they're just on their best behavior when they go to Sunday.
Sure, yeah. See, Superman, right? Superman's alter ego is Clark Kent. So Clark Kent really is Superman. But Superman is not really Clark Kent. That is a disguise for everybody. Same when we go to church. When we go to church, Clark Kent shows up every time.
Yeah, he always says he's gonna faint.
There's Clark Kent sitting at church. You leave church, and then there's the real guy, Superman. So they're here in the internet world where we have social media. Everybody creates their thing, and they believe that the real guy, right, is here, and the fake guy is the persona they've created with their fake image and their fake name. But that's not true. It's the opposite. The real guy is that guy. The real guy is that guy, because now you're not afraid to be yourself. See, before I had the mask, right? When I'm using my own face and my own name, and my own integrity and my own character is subject to your opinions, to your judgments, I put on the mask. I go to church and I have the best behavior you ever seen in the world. But then when I leave that church, I could be myself.
Yeah, but when you're calling other people names,
Yeah.
and if you grew up in that kind of environment,
I never call other people names.
That's
I
abuse.
may talk under my own breath, like
I know.
somebody's driving down the road
But
and
you're
cutting people off, and you're like, oh, what a dumb,
oh, I know. I've been there.
But I've never actually called people names. I restrain myself. I may speak to myself in ways that I wished I could call them, but in the end, I restrain myself.
What
and I
about
don't
you
do
and
it.
upbringing and you being called names?
Yeah, that's the thing. That's why it doesn't have the weight or the value it has for you. I grew up that way. You didn't grow up that way. So it does have weight and value for you. But for me, it doesn't. Now we got to learn how to live with one another. I wash my hands and I say, you know what? Calling women C word is not good. Even if I never called that woman a bad word, you know who hears it? You do. My spouse hears it, and then my spouse says, well, if he says that about her, surely he says that about me. That's an assumption and not always true. Usually most men, including me, put wifey on such a high pedestal. There's all these women, and then there's you. And you are way up here.
Oh, am I?
Yeah.
Am I up there?
Now, let us finish with our small read here. Let us finish. He says, all right, chapters 18, verse 21, book of Matthew. Then Peter came up and said to him, Lord, how often will my brother sin against me? And if I forgive him, as many as 7 times? Right? So Peter's asking Jesus, when do I get out of this forgiveness business? Because surely when he comes to me and sins against me on the 7th time, I get to write him off, right? On the 7th time he comes and sins against me, violates me, makes me angry. That time right there. On the 8th time, you are no longer my brother, and I no longer am bound to forgiving you. Right? That's the question. Jesus said to him, I do not say to you 7 times, but 77 times. In some other translations or Mark or wherever it is, we'll say 7 times 77 times. Right? And all day, every day. So what if your brother came to you and sinned against you 7 times 77 times a day? 449 times today. What if I did that to you today? And Jesus says, forgive them every time. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who wishes to settle accounts with his servants. When he began to settle, one brought to him who owed him 10,000 talents, and since he could not pay, his master ordered him to be sold, and his wife, and his children, and all that he had, and payment to be made. So the servant fell on his knees, imploring him, have patience with me, and I will pay you everything. And out of the pity for him, the master of that servant released him and forgave him the debt. You don't have to pay me monthly payments. You don't have to pay me not a red cent. Forgive the debt.
We'll see.
But when that servant went out, he found his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii and seized him and began to choke him, saying, pay me what you owe me. So his fellow servant fell down and pleaded with him, have patience with me, and I will pay you. No, what is hypocrisy? I hold you to a higher standard than me. All right? I go and do one thing, practice one thing. I go to the master and say exactly what you said. Have patience with me, and I will repay you. Difference is this. He refused and went and put him into prison until he should pay back the debt. When his fellow servants saw what had taken place, they were greatly distressed, and they went and reported to their master all that had taken place. Then his master summoned him in and said, you wicked servant, I forgave you all that debt because you pleaded with me. And should not you have shown mercy to your fellow servant as I had mercy on you? And in anger, his master delivered him to the jailers until he should pay all his debt. So also my heavenly Father will do to every one of you if you do not forgive your brother in your own heart. One of the reasons we're stuck in this place of despair, disappointment, discouragement, depression, and in the cycle. What keeps us stuck in that place of frustration, that place of feeling as though God has forsaken us, God has forgotten us, God is punishing us? What is it that's causing all that? Unwillingness to forgive the abuse that occurred. Jesus says many times, if you show mercy, God will show you mercy. If you want out of this trap, show yourself mercy. Quit blaming yourself. Quit looking at what you can't do, what you don't have, what you have no control over, and surrender to God. And then God will bless you with the hope, faith, loyalty, and love. And then these things become a blessing. If I moved out of the past, here's Lot's wife. They're leaving Gomorrah. All of Lot's wife's family is from Gomorrah. She even has children there. If you read the whole story, the children wouldn't leave. But Lot, his daughters, and the wife leave. She looks back, and the angel of the Lord says, whatever you do, don't look back. Don't go back to the past. Don't go back to the abuse. Don't go back to that former life. And then all of a sudden, she looks back and is instantly turned into a pillar of salt. And that is a form or an expression of deep bitterness. Deep bitterness. So we cannot go back. In fact, no matter what effects or what abuse we've experienced in our past, we can't change that. It happened. And it's always going to be there. It's always going to be a part of our life. But we can't change it. And I can't create a better tomorrow. Because really, in reality, all I have control over is right now. What has God endowed me with right now? The ability to preach and teach to you a better way of life. That's what God has endowed me with. And I'm willing to be a vessel for God. Is teaching and preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ a good deed? Yes, it's a good deed. But you know what's a greater deed? You know who's better than the teachers? The people who put the message to practice. They're better. I want to leave you with this. Go back to chapter 17. And the disciples asked him, then why do the scribes say that Elijah must come first? And he answered, Elijah does come. And he will restore all things. But I tell you that Elijah has already come. And they did not recognize him, but did to him whatever they pleased. So also the Son of Man will certainly suffer at their hands. Then the disciples understood that he was speaking to them about John the Baptist. John the Baptist stayed in one location right there at the Jordan River, baptizing people, and he was a teacher. He was a teacher of the gospel of Jesus Christ, the coming of our Lord. And why was Jesus greater than John the Baptist? Because Jesus was the one who took the teachings of John the Baptist and manifested them, practiced them, made them a reality. So, take my teachings and practice them. I love you. God bless you. And I'll see you next time.